Okay, good afternoon, everybody, and I want to start by saying that our good colleague, Tim Kaine, has been just a phenomenal leader on this issue and a great ally in the fight against another endless war. So I'm going to kick it off to him, and then I'll speak after Tim. Tim.
Thank you, Chuck. Well, thanks to everybody. I want to thank our leader who has been very focused on this with me. I want to thank my colleague, Adam Schiff, who's been a real leader both in the House and now Senate on this issue of war powers. And I also want to thank Senator Rand Paul, who could not be at this, but has just been rock solid on this issue for many, many years. I've been trying to do this since September to get the Senate to take seriously the issue that we shouldn't send our sons and daughters into war without consultation, debate, and vote in Congress. And I have been very puzzled, and I know Chuck has too, and Adam has as well, with a desire to avoid this. The fact that we're 4+ months into this operation that began with a boat strike on September 2, and more than 200 so-called enemies have been killed. U.S. troops have been wounded. An armada has been amassed around the Venezuelan coast. We're seizing tankers. We used 150 airplanes in this air platforms in the operation Saturday, and now we're attempting to control not only the Venezuelan economy, but its politics, the timing of its elections, aspects of the Venezuelan society, as President Trump said for years. And there hadn't been a single public hearing in the Senate, in any of the committees, just drives me crazy. I came to the Senate obsessed about these war power issues because I'm a military dad and I represent a state that has deep, deep military equities. But we all should be obsessed about it. None of us should want this president or any president taking our sons and daughters to war without notice, consultation, debate, and vote in Congress. And so this was a big win today, to have every Democrat unified for this principle that this needs to be taken out of the skiff and put before the American public so they can see what's at stake and whether the administration has a plan or not. I applaud my Democratic colleagues, and I really applaud the number of Republicans who, with some urging by Senator Paul and our discussions, got on board. What does this mean? This was a motion to discharge my war powers resolution from the committee. The committee was going to lock it up and it was never going to see the light of day. So now it becomes the pending business of the Senate. What you will likely see next week is a vote on a motion to proceed, which we would expect simple majority, similar vote to today, and then a debate, finally, after months, about this military operation, the whole thing, including where it's going in Venezuela and possibly in other nations. That's a debate that under the procedure of the Senate could allow for amendments. But this is all about letting the public in on what's going on. It is so frustrating. If I'm at church, and I was on New Year's Eve, and somebody comes up to me and says, my kid's an Army Ranger, don't let the president send him into war. Or I have people ask me, what's the legal rationale? Or what's the targeting criteria? What are we doing? Even when I know answers to these questions, thus far I've been unable to tell them because we only know what we know from classified hearings. It's time to get this out of the skiff, get it on the floor of the Senate, get it before the American public, and do what the Constitution demands of us. Again, I really applaud Senator Schumer for just rock solid focusing on getting this done. And we're going to have a fulsome debate on this issue of the kind that we haven't been allowed to have for a very long time. And with that, I'll hand it back to Senator Schumer.
Well, thank you, Tim. So, today, the Senate really took a critical step to reasserting its constitutional authority and towards stopping President Trump as he's lurching towards another endless, expensive war. All the while, American families here are struggling with skyrocketing costs. Next week, this fight will continue in the Senate. The more the American people hear about what's going on in Venezuela, and the more they learn about it, the less they're going to like it, the more fiercely they will oppose it. This vote moves the resolution one step closer to final passage because Democrats forced Republicans to confront reality. The president is openly signaling a long-term military and financial commitment abroad with no authorization, with no plan. Another endless war. Now, this wasn't just a procedural vote. It's a clear rejection of the idea that one person can unilaterally send American sons and daughters into harm's way without Congress, without debate. At the closed hearing, both Tim and I, my first question to the panel, including Rubio and Hegseth and all of them, is we need to have a full discussion in front of America, not just in a skiff, a classified room with only senators. The whole American people ought to hear about it, listen to it, debate it. And they won't like it. We know that. They already don't like it. And they demurred. They wouldn't do it. None of our committee chairs, despite Tim's requests, my requests, Adam's requests, would hold public hearings. And as a result, the Congress today voted on the War Powers Resolution, or actually discharging the War Powers Resolution, simply so we could have a debate on this, one of the most important issues that ever faced the American people, going to war. And we've always learned, we've learned through the years, that when we try regime change and nation building of this sort, the American families pay the price in treasure and all too often in blood. This vote shows that the American people don't want more military adventures. They don't want more nation building. The pressure is now on Senate Republicans to do the right thing and take a stand. Now, just today, as you probably saw, President Trump said in the New York Times that the U.S. involvement could last much longer than a year. A year? Longer, the reporter asked. I would say much longer, the president replied. We're going to be giving money to Venezuela, which they desperately need. So a long war fought with American dollars to give money to Venezuela and with American soldiers, in all likelihood, on the line. When the president said that, I think it sent shockwaves even through the Republican caucus. I think that's one of the reasons the number of votes have grown. And then when he doubled down, said we're going to be giving money to Venezuela, that's a stunning admission. Years of involvement, billions of dollars when families here are struggling to pay the bills, to pay their health care costs. Why isn't that money going to help the average American family have their health care premiums stay stable instead of going up $500 or $1,000 a month? Donald Trump, when he ran, promised no more endless wars, and yet he's sliding straight to another one in South America. Americans are not asking for an endless war that does not improve their ability to pay their bills. Families should not have to choose between filling their gas tank and putting food on the table, while the president casually floats billions for foreign rebuilding without transparency, without authorization, and only or even a semblance of a plan. We don't even know what the plan is. Can't go over what happened in the skiff, but it was appalling. It seemed like back-of-the-envelope stuff. So what we did today was not a partisan act. I'm very grateful to the Republicans who joined us. It was not a partisan act, it was a constitutional one. We forced Republicans to face what is obvious. Trump will not stop here and won't stop now. But today's vote sends a clear signal. No president, no matter how reckless, no matter how egotistical, gets a blank check to wage large-scale military action abroad. Unlike Republicans, Democrats are focused on the real issues here at home: health care costs, child care, housing, power. And those priorities, we believe, must come first. And the contrast between what's happening in the House, where led by Democrats and Leader Jeffries, they will, in all likelihood, send us a bill to extend for 3 years our tax credits, and what's happening here in the House, most Republicans resisting even a debate on this, the right, the ability to go to war. The contrast is glaring. So the president said it himself, as I said, a year longer, a year any longer, even longer. This will last for years. As Americans read the newspapers this morning and hear that it's going to last for years, what do they think of? What the hell is going on in his mind? So next week we continue the fight. We're going to force debate. We're going to force votes. And we're going to hold our Republican colleagues accountable. That's our job. For whether they stand with the Constitution and the American families or unchecked presidential power. I'll say it again. The more the American people hear about what's going on in Venezuela, the more they learn about it, the more fiercely they'll oppose it. And the more the American people hear about this, the more Senate Republicans will have to confront the reality that the last thing the American people want is another endless war. Go ahead, Adam.
Thank you, Leader Schumer, and thank you, Senator Kaine, for your extraordinary leadership on this issue. Like Senator Kaine, I've long been interested and involved in this issue in the House of Representatives, trying to reform or repeal existing authorizations to use force that had long outlived their purpose. We have seen Congress's power to declare war, to refuse to authorize military action, atrophy, and sadly we have seen an atrophy in both Democratic and Republican administrations. So today's vote was very significant. We will now have a full debate on the Senate floor over the use of U.S. military force in what began as arguably an effort to interdict drug smuggling boats. That was the ostensible purpose of the military campaign. And either that wasn't the real purpose or we had an extraordinary degree of mission creep, because this now appears to be far more about oil than it does about drugs. But in either case, the reality is Congress has not authorized military action in Venezuela. And the idea that we are now going to run this country of so many millions without having to put boots on the ground, that we are going to somehow oversee a transition over a period of time without putting our service members further at risk, seems highly improbable, to say the least. Even if we were to only put a diplomatic presence on the ground, that presence must be protected. And we can see the number of troops growing even without that initially being the intention. Now, if the administration believes, as it evidently does, that risking service members to procure oil of another country is worth the risk, then let them put that to a vote. Let them come to Congress. Let them seek an authorization to use military force in that way. But given the administration has committed not to engage in regime change and not to engage in new wars, but rather to put America first, what is happening seems directly contradictory to what the President promised. So I'm looking forward to the full debate that we have next week. I hope it is really the beginning of the debate, as Senator Kaine was saying. It's time to move this out of the skiff and into the public light. Let them come and make the case for the use of military force this way. We have seen all too often in our history great hopes, great expectations about what we could do, what we could accomplish through the use of military force or economic coercion to change a regime and change the character of that regime and build a society, a democratic society. And ultimately, it is our service members who have paid such a dear cost when those hopes and expectations ran into the reality on the ground. So very grateful to Senator Kaine for his leadership on this issue. Been proud to work with him on it, and very much looking forward to a full and comprehensive debate. I think as the President's pledges that we will stay there for years continue, Republican concern will continue to grow. And all of us understand that the votes we're casting now, we will be held to answer for, depending on future events. And so, again, my thanks, Senator Kaine and Leader, for your work on this important issue.
Great. Questions? Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Leader. Senator Thone has said that this debate next week could eat into the time that you all would be proceeding with the minibus that the House is going to pass today. Are you concerned that he even mentioned that there may need to be a CR?
There's a required 10 hours to debate, but we will work with Senator Kaine so we can do both. We'd like to move the mini CR. We'll see what happens in the House. I believe it is today. Are they voting? I believe it is this week.
So you're confident that you all will be able to do both?
We want to try to do both. Absolutely.
Leader Schumer,
Yes.
how much do you think some of this saber rattling over the past couple of days from the President and the administration on Colombia, on Mexico, on Greenland, on Cuba contributed to the vote today?
Look, people don't want endless war. And when even before we know what they're doing in Venezuela and what they want to do in Venezuela, they can even accomplish, and we don't even know how they're going to accomplish. They start talking about Colombia, they start talking about Mexico, they start talking about Greenland. The American people are saying, what the hell is going on here? And what's gotten into the president's head? Yes.
Senator Schumer, the president issued a veto threat. Yeah, so the president issued a veto threat on this resolution. You don't have 67. Do you see?
One day.
But do you see the appropriations bills that are coming up that are needed to keep the government open past January 30th as an opportunity to put in a spending limitation? That
Look, we don't even know what the president, what the administration, the Trump administration doesn't even have a plan. So we don't even know what they're asking for. Yes.
Trump and several of your Republican colleagues maintained that the operation over the weekend was only for a law enforcement operation. Does this war powers resolution go far enough to prevent all unauthorized military force, or would a law enforcement operation be a loophole for the Trump administration?
Mr. Kaine.
Yeah. If this had just been an arrest of Maduro to bring him back to the Southern District of New York to face charges on a valid indictment, I wouldn't have called this up for a vote. And I think there's a question under the War Powers Resolution whether an arrest operation, even if it had a military escort, was hostilities that would allow this kind of a privileged vote to get a guaranteed vote in the floor. That's not what this is. Started in September, strikes against Venezuelan boats in open waters, and then the amassing of the Armada, and then the seizure of ships, and then the coordinated attack, 150 aircraft, and not just to extract the president, also to bomb military sites around Venezuela, the deposing of the government, the seizing of oil, the setting of conditions for future elections, and the promise that we're going to be there for years with the U.S. military enforcing a blockade in and out of Venezuela so they can't get anything in or out without our permission. This is not an arrest. If it was just an arrest, we wouldn't have been having this debate. It's much bigger than that, and that's why it needs to be put before the American public.
Nor did they even claim that it's just an arrest. The president kept talking of, well, he said it in 4 words, the United States will run Venezuela. That's not just an arrest. Yeah, Tim, go ahead.
2 points. First of all, if any other country did this, the United States, that is, blockaded our shores, sent in a military force to apprehend a fugitive, we would view that as far from a law enforcement operation. We would view that, frankly, as an act of war. What's more, the legal rationale that this military force was merely used to accompany law enforcement for the purpose of apprehending a fugitive, Nicolas Maduro. If that were the case, that would have been the end of our involvement with Venezuela. He has been apprehended. He has been brought to court. That would be the end of it. There is no law enforcement necessity in terms of the prosecution of Maduro that we blockade the country, that we seize oil resources, that we try to change the nature of the government. So if that was a legal rationale rather than a superficial pretext, it would be over. It is clearly not over.
Yes. Yes.
The House, as you know, is voting today on the veto override as well as the ACA bill. Do you see this as if those votes are successful, do you see this in conjunction with the War Powers vote as a broader sort of rebuke of President Trump by Republicans as well as Democrats?
Look, again, to quote the great Abe Lincoln, public sentiment is everything. Public sentiment, in terms of how Trump is behaving as president, what he's doing as president, keeps sinking and sinking and sinking. And our Republican colleagues realize that. So I think on this issue and other issues, you're going to find our Republican colleagues saying, maybe following Trump is like Thelma and Louise, right over the cliff.
Thank you.
Yes.
Obviously, this might be for you or for Senator Kaine, but next week, part of this process is that there's an open amendment process. Do you anticipate this resolution being amended, any of those amendments passing? And what have some of your colleagues said that they would like to see for it to be?
I don't think my colleagues on the other side thought it was going to pass, so I'm not sure that they've really thought that through. The last time we did this, after the Soleimani strike, we did pass a resolution saying, hey, look, Soleimani being gone is a good thing for the planet, but no war against Iran without a vote of Congress. And we did have about 7 or 8 amendments that we took up on the floor when the resolution was debated. We were able to deal with them all and dispatch them in the course of about 2 hours. If you're committed to a process, it doesn't have to drag out forever. We did 7 or 8 amendments, we voted on them, and then we moved that bill eventually to the president's desk. So it's early to say what might be out there, but I'm kind of inclined to agree with Senator Schumer. We know a lot that we can't describe. Once folks start to get deeper and deeper into this, I think they're not going to like it, and I would suspect that my colleagues may want to go light on the amendment process.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.